Alright, who's gonna be the boss of the Capstone Dungeon? It's you again! Ladies, gentlemen, and Harajim of all ages, there are two particularly major milestones on your journey through Diablo 4, those both being the unlocking of world tiers. Both of these are done by completing capstone dungeons, which are noted as being particularly difficult challenges, the devs stating that they are hard even for people that are at the equivalently correct level, which is level 50 for the first capstone dungeon and level 70 for the second one. I managed to complete the first capstone dungeon at level 45, that was with my leveling build, a storm and companion mix build that was a good bit of fun, but that was just my sort of gateway build. The one that I used to level the fastest to get to my second step, the one that I've been using for a while with minor changes here or there, the one that I absolutely love using, and with that build last night, I managed to beat the second capstone dungeon, the one balanced around being a challenge for level 70 characters, while I was level 60. I wanted to do it around level 58, and I think that I totally could have with this build, but I just had some other activities that took priority at the time. The point being, this build is unbelievably strong. If you want to get through the capstone dungeon as a druid at level 60, this will do it. The capstone dungeon was no challenge at all for me for the first two layers of it. The third layer did kill me a couple of times when the elite mobs were overly grouped up, but some careful pulling fixed that no problem at all. Then the final boss, well, on the first attempt, I got him to literally 1 health, and then just exploded. I died instantly, which is really annoying that I can't say I one-shotted even though it was that close. I mean, look at that health! He was a whisper away, pun intended. So after that, I went back to town, got myself some skulls, slotted into my jewelry for bonus armor, made an elixir that would actually help me out in a meaningful way, and even grabbed an incense just so I could be 100% sure that I'd get it. Went back in, killed the boss at level 60, no problem. All that to say, the build is good. It had some changes from the last time that I've talked about Pulverize Druid, and a bit of refinement has made it perfect for actually reaching World Tier 4, and then existing in it long enough to start getting even further gear upgrades like Ancestrals, which will then make you even stronger as a result. So without further ado then, let's dive into what the build is for those who haven't seen my previous video on it, and also those who have, because there has been some changes that have been made, all the skills that we take here, and a little bit of why, the spirit boons that we're using as well, as of course we're a druid, so that matters, the legendary aspects and uniques that you want to have too, as well as some general stats to look out for on that gear. And also I'll show you how my Paragon board is shaping up so far, but it's nowhere close to complete quite yet. Then finally we'll go over how to play the build and some tips for making it truly shine. Moving on to the skills that you want to take then, I'll be assuming that you are level 50 here, and if you haven't done it yet, you absolutely should do all of the renown for the various regions at minimum to the point that you get the bonus skill points. Without those, no build is finished, simple as that. In the basic skills then, you want Storm Strike with the Fierce enhancement on it. This gives us some damage reduction and also some CC, and a high chance of putting the vulnerable debuff on enemies in an AoE for 20% bonus damage. Obviously this is a pulverized build at its core, and not putting points into Maul means that our Grizzly Rage will be a touch weaker, but this just increases the damage outside of Grizzly Rage by so much that I cannot recommend it enough. Use this for a pulverized build, try it yourself, and you will feel the difference instantly. After that, you move on to the core skills node. Here you want Pulverize, obviously, with the Primal Path enhancement. This increases your damage reduction, and part of what makes this build strong is how insanely tanky that it is while still doing insane amounts of damage. You also want 1 rank of the Heart of the Wild passive so that you can get 3 ranks of the Wild Impulses passive for a massive damage increase. As well, get 1 rank of Predatory Instinct so that you can get 3 ranks of Iron Fur for even more damage reduction. In the defensive node cluster, you want to get Earthen Bulwark with the Preserving Earthen Bulwark enhancement. This gives you a nice big barrier and some Fortify, which works great both for extra damage reductions and also because we are using overpowers in this build, which are boosted by your fortified health. You will also want Debilitating Roar, and you want it for an on-demand mega damage reduction cooldown, and you should also go with the Preserving Debilitating Roar enhancement specifically for the bonus regen. As well, grab 1 rank of Ancestral Fortitude over here, and then 3 ranks of Vigilance here for a notable increase to your tankiness as well. Ignore the companion node entirely, we don't use anything from here, and then we reach the Wrath skill cluster, and here you want to start off by grabbing Trample. This is a fantastic general use tool, and you also want the Savage Trample enhancement over here, which gives you a bit of extra spirit. It gives you Unstoppable to break CC. It will travel through enemies when you use it to get you out of danger group if they're blocking you. It also does pretty decent damage too, too, not to mention you can target it all the way at the corner of your view to travel a ridiculous distance super quickly, and if you use it to knock an enemy into a wall, it also stuns them for a brief period. You also want 1 rank of the Mending passive, and this lets you get 3 ranks of Provocation. This makes you get a free guaranteed overpower every 20 seconds that you stay in Werebear form, and this specifically applies to in-between combat. Our base form is Werebear, so you start every fight with an overpower as a result of this passive. It also applies to Grizzly Rage, as in Grizzly Rage you will stay in bear form long enough to trigger it too. You also want 3 ranks of the Crushing Earth passive, which makes Earth skills deal bonus damage to crowd-controlled enemies, and then 3 ranks of Stone Guard for a damage bonus to Earth skills when you have more than 50% of your health bar as Fortify. After that, we get to the ultimate node cluster, and here you want Grizzly Rage, of course, for your big, powerful damage cooldown ability, as well as its enhancements there too. On top of that, we are taking every rank of all of these passives over here in this little cluster, 3 ranks of Defiance here, 3 ranks of Natural Disaster as well, 3 ranks of Resonance, and then we're also going to be taking 3 ranks of Circle of Life. Between this is a ton of damage to add up to your Earth skills, and a core part of this build is that Pulverize counts as an Earth skill for us. On top of that, it also gives you bonus damage when switching from Storm skills to Earth skills, and with Storm Strike as our basic and Pulverize as our core, we will be doing that quite a bit. Then finally, we also have our key passive, which is going to be Earthen Might over here. In the earlier version of this build, I recommended either using Ursine's Strength or Nature's Fury, but as you progress in levels, the Earthen Might skill will simply take over as being the best one, especially for the Capstone Dungeon specifically, which is a lot of what today is about. Earthen Might gives you a relatively low lucky hit chance to refill your spirit bar, and also give you guaranteed critical hits for 5 seconds afterwards. The thing is, the lucky hit chance rolls on every instance of damage. If you hit 30 enemies with 1 press of Pulverize, it will roll 30 times, which means the larger the group of enemies that you're against, the higher the chance that this will proc. There are various times in the Capstone Dungeon where that will pay off.
I'm sure it will pay dividends.
That's all the skills that we are taking then. If you want a more in-depth explanation of why we build the way that we do for this, or even a level-by-level breakdown if you want to see the order that I recommend if you don't have all the skill points yet, then check out this video here on the channel. That's a more in-depth explanation for an earlier version of the build that hasn't been updated quite to this level. That said, let's move on to your spirit boons. You want the 3rd spirit boon in the Deer Path for 10% damage reduction to elites. You want the 4th boon in the Eagle Path, which gives you 30% increased critical strike damage. The 4th boon in the Wolf Path, which gives you ultimate duration extended by 25%. Then you want to bond with the Snake to give you 2 boons here, which are the first one for a guaranteed overpower every 20 kills that you get, and the 4th one for lucky hit chance to reduce the cooldown of your ultimate with nature magic skills, which again Pulverize counts as in this build. Again, this rolls individually for each hit of damage that you get, so if you Pulverize for a group of 20 mobs, it rolls this chance 20 times. As for your actual gear itself, then this is where it gets pretty fun for me. A lot of these skills that we have in this build, as far as the actual skill points that we spend, are more towards tankiness, and that's because our legendary synergies provide an insane amount of damage to each other, so we don't need to build that there. The most important one though, integral to the build as a whole, is Aspect of Ursine Horror. This makes Pulverize count as an earth skill and also leaves a little pool behind you when you use it that applies damage over time. After that is the Shockwave aspect, and this is just absolutely insane. I absolutely positively recommend putting this on a 2-handed weapon. It completely makes the build unstoppable when you do this, because what it does is send out a wave in front of you that when you use Pulverize actually hits for 120 to 200% of the damage that Pulverize does initially if you have it on a 2-handed weapon, meaning that it will hit for more damage than the close range Pulverize does and make it a projectile, essentially. On top of that, if you aim it right, you can hit enemies with both the initial impact of Pulverize and the Shockwave projectile too, not just one or the other, and this compounds the damage in insane amount. The next most important one, which I would recommend putting on your amulet for 50% boost, is the Aspect of Retaliation. This boosts the damage of core skills relative to how much Fortify that you have. We have tons of Fortify generation, so this generally just boosts your damage a ton with Pulverize. After that, we have the Crash Stone aspect. This increases your critical damage with earth skills on crowd-controlled enemies. This synergizes really well with 2 others that we use, the Aspect of Quicksand over here. This applies a slow to all enemies that you hit with earth skills for a short period of time afterwards, so every enemy hit by Pulverize is then crowd-controlled and thus takes the bonus crit damage. Also, the aspect of the Rampaging Werebeast, which not only increases the duration of Grizzly Rage, it also stacks a critical hit bonus every time that you hit a critical hit during Grizzly Rage. So essentially, you gain 10% crit damage every time that you get a critical hit during Grizzly Rage, and it stacks with itself, and that's just sort of really crazy, and that's where the Earthen Might key passive really makes its living. If you get a good crit on a group of adds, you proc the lucky hit on Earthen Might, You have guaranteed crit for 5 seconds, every single one of those adding up and giving you more crit damage, which then stacks up on itself. Keep building up this modifier during Grizzly Rage, and you get it to insane places damage-wise. Past that, we have a unique item that can drop as soon as you hit World Tier 3 if you get lucky, which is Insatiable Fury. This simply makes Werebear form your default state, which lets you build up overpower while just walking around, and it also gives you 2 bonus ranks to all Werebear skills, which is just a nice bit of damage boost. This one is not required, but it is definitely nice to have, though it will be replaced later on when you get a much rarer unique at a higher level. One of your other 2 slots should have the aspect of Mending Stone. This quite simply makes Earthen Bulwark last a total of 9 seconds instead of the 3 seconds that it lasts by default. It just makes it way better as a defensive tool and way more useful for us as a whole. For your last slot, you want one last defensive legendary. I've got one that makes Earthen Bulwark's barrier larger for every enemy that you crowd control in between casts, but the legendary that makes your basic attacks give you damage reduction is also incredible here, as is the legendary that builds up stacks of armor bonus every time that you hit an enemy. All of this said, there is one super important way that this build will change, and that is once you get Vasili's Prayer, the unique helmet. I have not seen this drop for anyone below level 60, so unless you get insanely lucky, you simply won't be able to use that until then, and I don't have it yet either, personally, but essentially when you do have this, it will replace the Insatiable Fury aspect and make the build a fair amount stronger as a result, with some changes that you'll have to make with it too, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. This build is not about that. It does not have Vasili's Prayer in it. That build can come at a later date when I have the unique to show you the whole build around. This build, however, is the best version of Pulverize Druid before you get that unique, which again, most people simply will not have until World Tier 4, so this is the build that gets you there in the first place. As far as where to get them, a number of these legendary powers aren't available as Codex powers, so they're just entirely random, but for those that are, simply look at your Codex of Power and you can see which dungeon different aspects come from, even if you haven't gotten them yourselves. For general stats, your goal is to get every one of these aspects as a sacred legendary in general, just because this means it has higher item power and higher item power equipment rolls with stronger stats. Having higher stats in general is really important. Higher armor and higher weapon damage rolls with the right legendary aspect is more important to your build at this stage in the game than having specific affixes on your gear is. That said, you want to look for willpower first and foremost, as that is a percentage increased damage to all of your skills. You want crit damage second most importantly, overpower damage third. You will overpower a ton, and more overpower damage results in good things, obviously as a result of that. Lucky hit chance increase and crit chance increase are essentially on a similar level, tied for fourth. Both of these are to increase the chances of activating Earthen Might, which is a big bonus to all of your damage. Then of course, just more ranks in skills that we use, like extra pulverize on your gloves is incredible, really good, gives you more damage on that skill. And then also on your amulet, you can get extra ranks of passives, so if you get the extra ranks of passives that you already use, then that is just great. As far as your Paragon board goes, it's the path that I've taken so far. Essentially focus on the damage increase nodes, like this one is obviously plus 20% damage is actually a really big deal. Work your way over to the glyph slot as quickly and efficiently as you can, and in this first glyph slot, you absolutely want to put in the Werebear glyph if you have it, and if you don't have it, you should find a way to get it, because honestly, this is just incredible for the build. It simply gives you extra damage while you're in Werebear form, which is 90% of what this build is based around as far as damage outputs, so more damage in that form might as well just read as more damage as a whole. I've gone for Ancestral Guidance over here as my second board, and you just sort of beeline it over to the legendary node as quickly as you can, because this will give you a damage bonus every time that you spend 75 spirits for 5 seconds. This will always activate during the proc of Earthen Might, which makes it line up with your guaranteed crit window. Stacking that with the damage bonus, it just makes an incredible synergy right there. And then for your second glyph slot, it will take you quite a while to reach there, but the one that I would recommend using is actually the Spirit glyph once you do, and you'll get there around level 65, maybe a bit sooner if you get all the bonus Paragon points from Renown. This will both increase your crit damage and also increases all damage that you do against enemies that you have hit with critical hits, with stacking bonuses to that. And that's it then for what the build is properly and how to put it together, so let's talk about how to play it as a whole. First and foremost, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but there is actually a sweet spot when you are using Pulverize where you hit your target, both with the initial impact sort of melee ranged attack of Pulverize and with the shockwave projectile that is launched out forwards. Essentially this doubles up or even triples up on your damage from one cast of the skill. It isn't really easy to explain what this distance is, but just watch your damage numbers in single target fights and you can find the sweet spot by seeing how many numbers pop up when you press the button. Get comfortable with that, work around it, it's really worth it. Earthen Bulwark should essentially be used on cooldown as a defensive. It is great for survival and just helps out too much to ignore. If you are in danger of death, press debilitating Roar to give yourself a few seconds of instant safety. Only use Storm Strike if you don't have the spirit to use Pulverize. Otherwise, always use Pulverize, and as for Trample, use this as a movement tool, as a way of breaking CC with its Unstoppable, or for stunning enemies by shoving them into walls. As for Grizzly Rage, you essentially want to use it on cooldown, but for specific bosses like the final boss of the Capstone Dungeon, you should save it for right as all of the ads spawn in the fight. This is when you are most likely to trigger Earthen Might, as you are hitting a ton of enemies at once, and thus this lets you get a nice building crit damage bonus for the rest of your Grizzly Rage duration on the single target portion of the fighting too. Essentially, as far as killing the Capstone Dungeon boss like I did, you just need to work out which attacks are safe to stand in, which you need to pop Debilitating Roar to survive, use Earthen Bulwark on cooldown, kill all of the ads, and watch my Grizzly Rage timings here too, honestly. It takes just a touch of luck as well as far as getting Earthen Might to proc at the right time, giving you massive bursts of damage as well. It may take you a couple of tries, but again, even at level 60, this build is more than capable of knocking down the Capstone Dungeon and entering World Tier 4. World Tier 4 itself is actually easier than the Capstone Dungeon, especially the boss that unlocks it, which lets you start walking around and getting ancestral items that will boost your build to hell, and even more uniques that do not drop prior to this point. And that's it, everyone. My experience with the Capstone Dungeon and unlocking World Tier 4 at level 60, I absolutely believe this build could do it even earlier at level 59 or 58, maybe even lower if you're pro at dodging attacks, and of course a brief overview of the build that I used to do it with. It is very similar to a build that I did recently, with some slight but important key changes I've made as I messed around with it to find the ideal combinations, such as using Earthen Might as the key passive to create insane damage windows when it does proc. I hope you've enjoyed this, and if you are struggling to reach World Tier 4, I hope this helps you out, and I hope you enjoy using this build if you give it yourself a go. There are even greater heights that this build can reach with ancestral items, and with some certain uniques added into the pool in World Tier 4, and I cannot wait to show you just how powerful a bear build can really be in Diablo 4 in the near future. Like if you liked the video, subscribe with the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.